Jeremy, thank you so much. CIVETS versus BRICs, and I mean South Africa being part of that stable. It's interesting to note it is about emerging markets, and we kept talking about what investors are going to be doing when it comes to various emerging markets, whether they'd be seeing South Africa as an attractive investment destination. Do you think that is playing out?
Well, it's interesting that the BRICS terminology was evolved by an economist at Goldman Sachs about 10 years ago. Yeah. So everyone, I think, understands exactly what BRICS stands for. But CIVETS was only first talked about by the chief executive of HSBC, the bank, in April, May this year. And it's slowly gathering traction. I think South Africa should rejoice that it's seen as that next tier of emerging markets. And this is perhaps one of the reasons why HSBC is rumoured to be looking to pump up its operations in South Africa.
Well, how seriously do investors take these acronyms that are formed by various people?
I think that's a very good point, but BRICS took a long time to gain traction, but now I think it's on everyone's lips. I think CIVETS will take a little bit of time, but I think anything the chief executive of a major bank like HSBC says should be taken very seriously. And it's great that he sees South Africa in that second tier.
Merina, how seriously do you take all of this? I mean, BRICS, as we said, gaining a lot of traction. CIVETS is something that we are starting to talk about, and of course is starting to be quite a big focal point.
Yes, well, I think most people are taking it more seriously. Most investors are definitely taking it more seriously. We see now that in the major economies in America and in Europe, there's not going to be a lot of growth for the next decade, perhaps. And probably in the BRICS also, most of their growth have come, and maybe they won't have such nice opportunities going forward. But I think the opportunities are definitely in emerging markets, and so I'm glad to see that South Africa forms a part of that pool.
Should South Africa as well be looking to work with the likes of Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt and Turkey as well?
I think anything that happens in the world today, you need friends, you need people you can work with.
Especially if you're part of the same acronym.
Exactly, and this is where I think South Africa, some people think, should be part of BRICS. I think that's wrong. I don't know what Merina thinks, but no, we're too small for that. But this is where Southern Hemisphere trade as well, I think, is set to increase.
And you mentioned HSBC. I mean, obviously we know that HSBC has prospects to buy out Nedbank in the country. Do you think that it's something we should have actually preempted a while ago?
Preempted in what way? Because I think South Africa, again, needs friends, needs colleagues. Standard Bank is linked to a Chinese group. There's a lot of trade. We know that China is actually focusing on Africa. And if you argue then that Johannesburg is the gateway to Africa, it makes a lot of sense that a bank like HSBC has a strong presence in South Africa, which then they'll use up into the rest of the continent.
And Merina, just looking at the countries that we are in the same stable with, as I mentioned, Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, how do we fare relative to these countries? Because at the end of the day, we've got labour laws that are vastly different, perhaps more stringent. So in other words, foreign investors or prospective investment opportunities in South Africa, they'd rather look elsewhere. And of course, our rand is also quite strong, but we're offering good yield. I mean, we've spoken about this extensively. Yeah.
Well, I think we fare fairly well. At this point in time, we have sustainable growth in this country projected for the next few years. We have fiscal deficits that are definitely much better than overseas or other, for that fact, developed countries. And if compared with the other CIVETS, we fare fairly well. I think there's a political risk connected to our country, and that might be something that scares off investors. And if you think about the largest one there, Turkey, and probably the first one, Colombia, they've got excellent opportunities, and I think we're about third or fourth in that category. And in some of those other countries like Egypt, we're much better than Egypt if we look at their fiscal state and the growth projected from there. And we have to remember we're a very rich resource country, perhaps arguably the richest between all of those countries. And we just have to figure out how to really use the challenges that are at the moment really rife in this country, like the rand, and really use that and live with that and work with that and change things to be more profitable and productive with those challenges that we have.
All fair, you said brand South Africa, and that's really what you focus on. Wage negotiations underway. We had a successful World Cup. Just spoke to Peter Leon about the mining charter issues and of course all the issues that have come through with the nationalisation of mines and that debate that is still ongoing. What do you think that is doing to the brand of South Africa?
I think you talk any brand, you immediately have impressions. So you say South Africa, then you say Colombia or Vietnam. You know, all of us have histories. South Africa has a fantastic new history. We've got fantastic goodwill. So many people came out for 2010, and I think that's good and equity, but we need to build on that and grow it. And I think at the moment there seems to be a little bit of disruption in the country. I think everyone expects emerging countries to be interesting places, not perhaps as stable as other places, but South Africa needs to build on that goodwill and grow and take advantage. You know, we have a following wind at the moment. We mustn't waste it.
At this point, where do you see the most interest coming through? Is it Asia that is particularly interested in South Africa, or is it all round?
I think, you know, when you look at China, China needs natural resources. That's why it's come into Africa in such a strong way. I think one of our problems is we're exporting commodities. We're not beneficiating, we're not manufacturing, we're not creating our own brands. And commodities are almost the bottom of the food chain. So I think that's something that needs very serious attention.